Snowmen are popular Christmas motifs for all age groups. For this video, I made a simple template that you can download in the community area on my channel. In this video, I will show you now step by step how you can paint the little snowman with very few colors and then use it to create Christmas cards in different formats. Hello and welcome back to Art for Everybody. My name is Evi Steiner-Böhm. I'm an artist from Germany, and I also have two assistants who are called Pedro and Rosa, and they make sure that I explain things as beginner-friendly as possible. Today I have chosen a very easy motif that you can use for a Christmas card, but which is also very easy to make with children. I hope you have fun with it now. The material we need is absolutely inexpensive. I have a watercolor box here with 16 colors, but we won't need all the colors because we'll only use light ochre, ultramarine blue, cyan blue, cadmium red and indigo. If you want to do this with children, you can easily do it with a school painting box and use the colors I've just shown you. You just shouldn't use opaque white to lighten the colors, but do, as I do with watercolors, simply use lots of water if you want the color to be lighter. As for brushes, I have two watercolor brushes, and it makes sense to use watercolor brushes also when working with children, because the results are simply better than with cheap brushes. This is a number 12 and also a number 2, for I don't think you'll be able to do the outlines without a small brush. I also have two pencils, a 2H for pressing through the template now, and a 4B for sketching. If you like, you can trace the outlines afterwards with an ink pen. Then it will look more like a colored drawing, but that's your choice, of course. In terms of format, I've got a 30 by 40 centimeter watercolor paper here. The motif is relatively small, but if I want to print the motif later as a Christmas card, I will have the area here where I can put the text. And if you want the card in portrait format, of course, you can simply make the drawing smaller and make it fit to like an H6 format. I'm doing my painting now so that both are possible, and you'll see that later in the Christmas cards. I have made a template of my little snowman, which I press onto my watercolor paper using graphite paper. Graphite paper is not absolutely necessary. You can do it just as well with carbon paper. The disadvantage of carbon paper, however, is that you cannot erase it. And if you don't want to use that, you can simply blacken the back of the template with a pencil and press the motif through. If you prefer to copy the template, the learning effect is of course greater. In that case, it makes sense to start with the balls. I'll show you this with the 4B now, and then it will be clearer for you. Okay, you start with the large ball, and then the smaller ball stands on top of the larger one. By making a flat curve, I show that the small ball has been pressed onto the larger one, like a snowball. With the hat, you have to make sure that this ellipse goes upwards so that the hat sits nicely on the head. But if the drawing isn't quite exact, that's okay. With the eyes, make sure that the lights remain white. I'm also going to let the horizon extend further here, because when I make a text box, it will be roughly in that area, and then I can still see a bit of the motif at the bottom. And generally, if you're making something that is to be printed later, it's always good to have a lot of space around the motif so that you can insert the photo variably into the desired template. Okay, with the shovel, one branch should support it and the other must therefore go over it so that the shovel looks as if it's stuck between the branches. So that was the preliminary drawing. Now we are going to make the snowman first, and for that we need two different shades of blue, ultramarine and cyan. And I'm mixing the two because I want to use the pure cyan for the sky later. Ultramarine, however, is better suited as a shadow color for the snow because it's a bit warmer. And by mixing them, I make sure that the two shades of blue go well together later. And now I dab this color into the left side of my snowballs and then water it down immediately towards the light side. This automatically makes it look soft, just like snow looks. Along the bottom of the balls, it can get a bit darker to give the impression that it's going inwards. And now I'm just going to dab a bit of the blue in there again. In these places in the middle, I soften the colors again so that no hard edges appear. Then I mix a very light yellow with a light ochre and lots of water. This should be almost white and should only strengthen the contrast to the cold blue. Be careful not to paint into the blue so that it doesn't turn greenish. So now we let the snowman dry well and meanwhile make the shovel and the scarf. The shovel is simple. I use the pure cadmium red from the box for this. And I simply fill the form of the shovel. When it's dry, I will make it a little darker on the side so that there is a light and shadow effect there too. For the hat I use indigo, which is a bluish black, and I need the small brush for that now. Otherwise it won't be as precise as I want it to be. To create a light effect here too, I take a little paint out of the right hand side. I'll then paint a second layer over the dark side later so that I get a really nice deep black. For the shovel handle, I'm now mixing a brown, quite simply, from the red, yellow ochre and a bit of the indigo. When the snowman is completely dry, meaning there are no more wet spots around the edges, we can do the background next. I need a lot of water for that because I'm only going to indicate it. The only thing I have to be careful about is that the cyan gets lighter towards the horizon. It's a good idea to lift the block up a bit. And don't worry, it doesn't matter if some cauliflower structures appear because they will look like clouds or snow. The color should flow nicely so you can work with a lot of water. It can be quite irregular. As I said, it just needs to get lighter towards the bottom. To the right, where my text field will later be, I simply use a lot of water so that the color gradually vanishes. On the light side, towards the snowman, the sky can be quite dark now, while behind the snowman, the blue becomes much lighter so that the light and shadow effect is further enhanced. You'll see the effect as soon as we're finished. For the snow below, I now mix the ultramarine into the cyan blue again and simply create wavy shadows. And in some of the light areas, I just put on a thin layer of yellow ochre. To further enhance the light and shadow effect, I paint a very dark shadow next to the snowman now. Because if the light comes from here, then I have a shadow there. And to do this, I now mix indigo into my snow color. There can also be a small shadow next to the shovel, of course. And now the paper again has to dry really well before we can continue working. The remaining parts are now mainly detail work, but they should be quite easy to manage. I'm giving my snowman a striped scarf, but you can of course use any other color or pattern. For the nose, which is supposed to be a carrot, I mix the yellow ochre with my red, which gives a very light brownish orange. For the buttons and the eyes, I also use indigo. I'm now mixing it up quite thickly. Make sure that you leave the lights white so that he looks like he has real eyes. I'm just making the mouth as a line and not with small dots. Normally, you would of course press dark stones into the snow or something like that, but I think it looks prettier this way. Then I need a very light indigo for the brim of the hat so that it later stands out from the dark space inside. Next, I need the branches. For this, I use a very dark brown. And it is very important here that the branch starts on the side of the body so that it looks as if it is standing at an angle. Okay, now we need some shadows. And I'm using thick dark black for the bottom of the hat. And it can also be a little darker along the area where the hat casts a shadow on the head. And for the shadow in the shovel, I'm using this brownish red because it shouldn't be too dark, too noticeable. Otherwise, it would look unnatural. We also need a shadow between the snowballs, so I'm mixing a little of the indigo into my snow color. Then I draw a line at these break lines here, but immediately water it down again so that no contour is created. This gives the impression that the upper ball is casting a shadow on the lower one. And finally, you can make the snow a little more prominent here and strengthen the horizon, and then we're almost done. If you don't trace the snowman afterwards with an ink pen, you'll have to rework the contours that aren't clear on the edges. But please always dilute the color immediately towards the outside so that no thick contours remain, but rather a smooth transition is created. Especially if you're working with children, I recommend using colored pencils here, because very few children are able to work cleanly enough with a fine brush to make it look delicate. Okay, I will take a photo of the picture now and then trace the outlines with the ink pen. And with that, I will have two alternatives afterwards, and can decide which I like better. I'll use a number 8 waterproof ink pen. It's pretty thick, so it doesn't matter if you work irregularly. Drawings always look more lively anyway when the lines aren't too perfect. And finally, I'll take a second photo of my little snowman now, and then I will go to the computer and see what I can do with it. I can now design both a portrait and a landscape format for my Christmas card. Which font and decorative elements you use is of course a matter of taste. I personally always like gold best. And with that, I say goodbye to you. Thank you, as always, for watching, and I wish you lots of fun now trying the motif out. Until next time, with best wishes, yours, Evi Steiner-Böhm.